I've done far worse than kill you. I've hurt you, and I wish to go on hurting you. I shall leave you as you left me, marooned for all eternity, buried alive, buried alive. Sean! Sean!
At the end of the universe lies the beginning of vengeance. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
The Wrath of Khan, easily the highest rated Star Trek film of all time. Upon its release in 1982, the Nicholas Meyer-directed film reshaped the entire Star Trek universe and levied a massive creative influence over future iterations of the franchise that continues to this day. The film's impact on cultural significance cannot be overstated. Its financial success helped breathe new life into the franchise and quite possibly ensured its continuation for over the last 50 years. All of these things are what people already know, and what we as Trekkies like to talk about regularly. Whenever we preach a return to form for Star Trek, especially for the movies, The Wrath of Khan is the best example most of us can give as the perfect Trek film. However, almost nobody talks about the downsides of Khan and how this film also caused possibly irrevocable damage to Star Trek forever. What do I mean? Well, let me explain. While doing research for another video, I came across an article written by Ryan Britt for Tor.com. In it, he talks about how an obsession to outdo The Wrath of Khan has left the film side of Star Trek stagnant and in some cases really sour. He concludes the article by saying, quote, "We've set up Khan as some type of perfect ex-girl/boyfriend who dumped us a long time ago, and we compare every new date we get to Khan. Maybe it's time to move on." So this got me thinking, did The Wrath of Khan ruin Star Trek films with its greatness? How did it unintentionally damage a studio's ability to create future films? And if that's the case, is there anything we can do to fix it? I believe that before we can discuss whether or not The Wrath of Khan has caused damage to the franchise, we must first define what makes this movie so great. So today, I'm going to explain why I think The Wrath of Khan was elevated into being a cinematic masterpiece by following a simple storytelling technique. And no, surprisingly, it's not to have a good villain. I'm talking about the setup and payoff. This is Ketwalski. The setup and payoff, or more formally known as the plant and payoff, is a method used to subtly introduce a story point early on within the film, only to have that element return later, revealing that it was actually critical to the overall plot. Using this method of screenplay writing not only enhances the script, but creates a vastly superior, smarter, and engaging product. Why? Well, we as humans like making connections and figuring things out. So when you sprinkle Easter eggs throughout your story that have a connection later on, it tickles our brains, it makes us more engaged in the story being told, and gives us a positive feeling of satisfaction when everything comes full circle. When done well, this effect works great. However, when done poorly, it can either leave an unnecessary amount of bloat in your film, or payoffs that come out of nowhere with a feeling of deus ex machina for your audience. Highly skilled filmmakers can even play on the setup and payoff method with the inclusion of a red herring, but that's a discussion for another video. Some great examples of the setup and payoff includes the air tanks and Jaws that fall over and almost explode, only for them to use that explosive ability to kill the shark later.
Smile, you son of a...
And Ripley having a license to operate a loader because she can't be a pilot anymore, only to use that skill set to defeat the alien queen at the end of the film.
Get away from her, you bitch!
Okay, so now that we understand what the concept of setup and payoff means, now it's time to explain why I think this rule is what elevated The Wrath of Khan into a masterpiece that will stand the test of time. The Wrath of Khan is packed full of setups and payoffs. I would go as far as to say that the entire premise of the film is a payoff of the rivalry set up during the TOS episode Space Seed. The film's script is so lean and tightly wound that almost every scene, character action, and line of dialogue is used to its 100% potential. Additionally, almost the entire first part of the film is a giant setup for the actions and themes that we as the audience later experience in the movie. So what did I do? I dusted off my notebook and decided to jot down the examples of setup and payoff in the film to help illustrate my point, and hopefully get you to fully understand why you may love this film so much without really realizing this. So first up we have the Kobayashi Maru test. During the test, we see the shield dots activating and providing a visual means of showing how this defensive grid works and its importance. This is later paid off several times during the battle between the Enterprise and the Reliant.
Their shields are going up. Lock faces and ties.
Next, we have Kirk making jokes and not taking the sight of his friends dying very seriously during the training exercise. Later on, this theme is paid off during a conversation with his son David, where he says that he cheated death and patted himself on the back for his ingenuity for never having to face it or take the concept of death seriously. Then, we get set up for the no-win scenario at the end of the film, and we get a quote about how one deals with death is just as important as the way one deals in life. This sentiment, and the exact same line, is paid off after Kirk is mourning the loss of Spock, and his son David is there to remind him of the importance of his own wisdom. For Kirk's birthday, Spock gives him a copy of The Tale of Two Cities. This is paid off in two ways. One, being that serving aboard the starship together was the best of times while also being responsible for some of their worst experiences, and at the end of the film with a quote from the book about the self-sacrifice of the character Sidney Carton. Next up, Bones gives Kirk a gift of eyeglasses, which is used to establish Kirk's emotional crisis and feelings of getting old. Thematically, the glasses pay off several times throughout the movie, but most importantly, he's wearing them when he's using knowledge and wisdom to outsmart and defeat Khan. This is of course in contrast to the fist fight a younger Kirk had with him in the TOS episode Spacey. Additionally, in this scene, Kirk's apartment is filled with old trinkets and antiques. It's also set up to clearly indicate that he lives alone, almost like a bachelor. The accompanying dialogue he has with Bones solidifies the concern about getting older and missing his days as captain. This emotional issue is finally paid off when he's speaking with Carol Marcus about his regret of roads not taken, not being in his son's life, and that he feels old and worn out. When we first meet Dr. Carol Marcus and her son David, we see his nervousness around Starfleet, almost that he is afraid of them. They also set up Kirk being his father later on. This gets paid off twice. First, when the Reliant seemingly wants to take the Genesis device no matter what they say, seems to play up the fact that David was right, and in the scene, of course, where Kirk talks about his son, revealing the audience his connection to David. Next up, we see the bugs under the sand with Khan's explanation about how they drive hosts completely mad, which is paid off with the captain going crazy, sacrificing himself to prevent the death of Kirk. Here in this scene, we see a bunch of books inside the SS Botany Bay wreckage. The books listed are Moby Dick, Paradise Lost, The Inferno, The Holy Bible, and King Lear, all of which share a thematic connection to the plot of this film, and all of which get paid off in various ways, but specifically, we get payment through the Genesis device's name and its purpose, and Khan's frequent use of quotes from all of the books.
From hell's heart, I stab at thee.
Next up, they spend a lot of time setting up the fact that the crew on board the Enterprise is really new and inexperienced, and this is paid off twice again. One, being that the crew is somewhat bested by Khan without much effort, and how we see a lot of the crew running away during the first battle in engineering. The start of the Enterprise's journey begins inside of this torpedo room, which serves as a bookend to the film with Spock's funeral being held in the same location. During the engineering room inspection, you can see in the background the radiation chamber and the device Spock manipulates to save the Enterprise. You can even see radiation stickers on the door telling the audience it's hazardous. Obviously, this gets paid off with Spock's self-sacrificing sequence at the end of the film. Several times throughout the film, we see Kirk is visibly uncomfortable on the bridge. He's almost shy and fearful of being there again. Additionally, Kirk is uncomfortable with taking command of the ship before departing for regular station. This level of apprehension and nervousness is paid off in a negative way when he is slow to react during the first fight and encounter with Khan, costing several lives. Here we are shown the Genesis activation console being prepped by Marcus and her son David, and this is of course paid off later by Khan using the same prop to activate the Genesis in a suicide attempt. In this scene, we re-establish Spock's Vulcan religion and his heritage with this costume, meditation pose, and the props up to the left, reminding the audience of its significance. This is paid off later when Spock mind melds with Bones right before entering the radiation chamber. That way this did not feel like as though it came out of nowhere. Also in this scene, the two iconic phrases from this movie are set up, only of course to be later paid off during Spock's death scene. During this scene, Khan's blood feud is established, as he chooses to ignore his instinct for survival and instead to go for revenge on Kirk. This is later paid off in two ways. One, for his arrogance during the first confrontation with Kirk, and again with chasing the Enterprise into the nebula even though he didn't need to, which ultimately led to the death of his crew and his demise. Here we see blood on Kirk's uniform, from Scotty's nephew. This signifies the lowest point of the film, and is visually telling us that Kirk is hurting both emotionally and with his confidence. This is later paid off after he tricks Khan with his open-line communication ploy with Spock, and he gets a fresh uniform to signify the final turns upwards towards our hero's victory. The TOS episode Space Seed was the setup with the marooning of Khan, and this is of course paid off with the marooning of Kirk. In this scene, it's mentioned that life forms grew at an accelerated rate inside of the Genesis device, which is paid off in Star Trek III. Here, Kirk reveals that he doesn't believe in a no-win scenario or facing death. This is of course paid off with Kirk being faced with the loss of Spock. That's a lot of examples, and I know I maybe hit you with quite a bit, but it's important to understand that this film is packed full of these prime examples of setup and payoff. My final thoughts are this. The Wrath of Khan is a fantastic film for many reasons. The characters, the villain, the visuals, the music. Everything is great. For me, I believe the film's smart and effective script is the reason that it stands the test of time. A fact that the production studios seem to be ignoring, and because of that, have led to a steady decline in well-made Star Trek films. But that's a topic for another day.